mengungkapkan malah.
I don't know how to express it. I'm so happy and touched. I feel like I just want to cry. I was so touched because where else can I see the Pope in person?
A joyous welcome in Southeast Asia for Pope Francis as he begins the longest and most ambitious trip of his 11-year pontificate. The Holy Father will have traveled more than 20,000 miles by the time his 11-day trip is completed. Pope Francis began his first full day of appearances on Wednesday in Indonesia, the world's most populous Muslim country. Children greeted the pontiff as he arrived to meet with Catholic clergy and nuns at the Jakarta Cathedral. Indonesia recognizes 6 religions. Just 3% of the population is Catholic. But the Pope's trip is seen as a reaffirmation of the Catholic Church's commitment to promoting religious harmony. In opening remarks earlier in the day at a welcoming ceremony at the official residence of the Indonesian president, Pope Francis encouraged the country's leaders to maintain that balance between cultures and religions and to respect human rights for all. Indonesia, the first of 4 nations on the Pope's itinerary. He has now journeyed to his second country, Papua New Guinea, where he will stay through the weekend. On Monday, he will travel to East Timor, a small nation with a majority Catholic population. Pope Francis will make his final stop in Singapore on September 11th. Our EWTN News colleague Courtney is part of the coverage team traveling with Pope Francis. She is the Rome correspondent for Catholic News Agency. We catch up with her in Indonesia prior to the Pope's departure for Papua New Guinea. Courtney, thanks so much for joining us. As I mentioned, you are traveling alongside Pope Francis on this grueling trip. Can you just speak to the rigorous pace of this trip, and how does Pope Francis seem to be holding up so far?
That's right. When you look at the length of this trip, it is staggering. Over the course of 11 days, the Pope is traveling more than 20,000 miles total on 11 flights across 4 countries in Southeast Asia. Now, you'd think that after a 13-hour overnight flight from Rome and a packed schedule full of public appearances, the Pope would be a bit tired. But I've been surprised to see that during the Pope's public appearances during his first week here in Asia, he's been full of energy. And you can tell he's really enjoying meeting with the local population. Now, it's important to mention that Pope Francis turns 88 years old in December, and he's been using a wheelchair throughout this week here in Asia. The Pope's also traveling with a full medical team of a doctor, 2 nurses, and all of his personal secretaries who are providing a bit of additional support for him on this long journey.
That is really interesting to know, but it sounds like his stamina is holding up. Courtney, Indonesia has the largest Muslim population in the world. So what does this papal visit mean to Indonesian Catholics this week?
There has been so much enthusiasm here in Indonesia, not just at the public events, but you also see many Indonesians lining the streets of Jakarta just to catch a glimpse of Pope Francis during his visit. You're right in mentioning that Catholics represent just a small minority of the population here, just 3% of the population. But it's important to keep in mind that Indonesia is a large country. So 3% of the population means that there's 8 million Catholics here. And many of the Catholics I've spoken with have expressed just such gratitude and said that they were touched by the fact that the Pope would make such a long journey to visit them at his age.
Can you just expand on that even a little bit further, Courtney? Because again, Catholics are such a small part of the population, but the country is home to the world's largest Catholic seminary. So can you share more insight into the life of Indonesian Catholics today?
Most Catholics I've spoken with here have described the Catholic Church in Indonesia as vibrant and said that churches are absolutely packed on Sundays. Now, one Catholic I spoke to had an interesting story. He said that he personally knows many Indonesians who have converted from Islam to Catholicism, including his own father. He said that living in a Muslim majority country, when he hears the call to prayer every day, he uses that as a daily reminder of faith, as a little reminder to pray the Angelus prayer.
Wow, that's a fascinating insight. And Courtney, the interreligious dynamic of this trip does stand out. Pope Francis met with the Grand Imam of the Istiqlal Mosque on Thursday. Tell us about that meeting.
Yes, interreligious dialogue has been an important theme of the Pope's trip to Indonesia, which is the largest Muslim country in the world. While in Jakarta, Pope Francis visited the largest mosque in Southeast Asia, where he signed a joint declaration with the Grand Imam of the mosque at an interfaith event. Now, this declaration contains a number of themes. It rejects religious-based violence, which is really significant, noting that Indonesia itself even struggles with, there have been incidents of religious violence against Christians in some parts of the country where there are religious tensions. The declaration also stresses the importance of interreligious dialogue, human dignity, and protecting the environment.
Those are all important themes. Courtney, the stadium mass with Pope Francis was expected to be a highlight of the Indonesian leg of this trip. You were there on Thursday. What stood out to you, and do we know how many people were in attendance?
Let me tell you, the atmosphere inside the Pope Stadium Mass in Jakarta was absolutely electric. Now, there was not only one stadium, but two stadiums. In the first main stadium, there were more than 60,000 enthusiastic Catholics who were chanting and cheering as the Pope arrived. But then next door, there was a second stadium that also had tens of thousands of Catholics. I learned from Indonesian authorities that there were more than 100,000 Catholics present at this Mass. So it was really something to behold.
Absolutely. Courtney, we have just under a minute left, but in our final moments together, what do you expect will stand out in the coming days, and what should our viewers keep their eyes out for as Pope Francis continues his tour through Southeast Asia?
This weekend, Pope Francis will be in Papua New Guinea, where the Pope will meet with local Catholics who minister in the capital city of Port Moresby with street children and the disabled. And so that will be an important meeting. But particularly interesting, after that, the Pope is heading off to a remote jungle outpost of Papua New Guinea, where he will meet with some Argentine missionaries who minister there. So that will be something really unique to behold. And after Papua New Guinea, the Pope is off to East Timor and then Singapore.
Wow. Well, we are just so grateful for your work, and be assured of our prayers for your travels as well. Courtney Juarez, thank you so much.
Thank you, Catherine.